trouble finding it. There it is. All right, we'll let the poll go for another moment or two. Right now, the majority of folks in the room are looking like farmers or want to become farmers. So that's super exciting. While we're letting that go forward, I just want to highlight a couple of things on this slide, which really just captures a little bit of what the Million Acre Challenge is all about. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it because you're here to hear Emma. But I do want to highlight the Soil Health Benchmark Study, which is facilitated by PASA, Sustainable Ag, and run through Future Harvest, who is one of our Million Acre Challenge partners, with Lisa Garfield as the head of that project. That will be growing in the coming months, that opportunity. So keep your ears open if being involved in the benchmark study is something you would like to consider. Farmer to farmer networking is a big focus of what we do, and you're doing it right now. You're in the room with other farmers, and we will also have in-person events throughout the season. So definitely keep your eyes open on our newsletter. We'll be offering some practice implementation funding and resources that'll direct you to that, even if it's not coming directly through us. Okay, let's go ahead and wrap up the poll. I think I can do that. All right, are you guys seeing that? Yes, all right, so there's the lay of the land. A good percentage of folks are farmers and a good percentage want to become farmers. We've got a couple of service providers and some others, and we still have people joining, so. This is sort of our public service announcement slide. It just tells you how to continue to connect with us as you go about your farm journeys. We encourage you to enroll in the Million Acre Challenge, and we're trying to train ourselves to stop using that word enroll because it sounds a little scary, and it shouldn't be, because really all we're looking for is for folks to sign up to sort of say that they're committed to following a soil health path. It doesn't mean that you have to be at a certain place on that spectrum yet, or that you're going to get to a certain place on that spectrum, just that you're engaged and willing to try and looking for next steps. Our Soil Health to-goes happen every second Wednesday of every month. Next month, we're going to be hosting a couple of folks from MDA to talk about some cost share opportunities through Maryland Department of Ag. We have monthly newsletters and social media. That QR code there takes you to our most recent, or to our follow and share us page if you want to consider doing those things. My name and my closest colleague, Lisa Garfield, are at the bottom. I'm actually housed with Chesapeake Bay Foundation, Lisa's with Future Harvest, and our other partner, who is represented today by Amanda Cather, is American Farmland Trust. Let me find my cursor. I am super excited to be able to give you a little bit of an introduction to Emma Jagoz of Woodsboro, Maryland, where she owns and operates Moon Valley Farm. Emma graduated from the University of Maryland with a BA in American Studies before she became a first-generation self-taught farmer. She founded Moon Valley in 2012 with no money, no land of her own, no experience, and 2 kids under the age of 2. Her kids are now 12 and 13. She leased land for 8 years before purchasing her own property, which is 25 acres of previously conventionally farmed land, which was purchased in 2019. Today, she and her staff produce certified organic specialty and staple vegetables and herbs. They sell through year-round community-supported agriculture program to 100 or more restaurants and to the local school system, with buyers in Washington, D.C., Northern Virginia, Baltimore, Frederick, and the Maryland suburbs. Moon Valley partners with several dozen other farmers and makers to diversify offerings across all the seasons, adding products like gourmet mushrooms, local fruit, eggs, sourdough bread, grains, beans, and more. Emma, it is such a pleasure to have you with us today, and we're really grateful for you taking some time out of what must be an incredibly busy schedule to be with us. We're going to spend a few minutes delving into these questions, and I'll pop right past this slide since we'll be circling back to all of these. And Emma, at this point, I'm going to start by kind of asking you to tell us a little bit more about, your farm and how you got started. I read a story recently about how the name of the farm relates to your childhood, if you want to share that as well.
All right. Well, hi, everyone. I'm honored that you're taking the time to listen to me today. So thank you all for coming. So I started Moon Valley Farm in 2012 with an audacious lack of resources and experience because I had caught the gardening bug in a few years earlier when I was pregnant with my first child. I was really obsessed with the idea of healthily obsessed, I would say, with the idea of becoming really healthy for my children. And I really realized that this was the time that I was feeding my growing fetus the nutrients he needed to grow. And when I got to the week about baby brain development in that book that everyone knows, the things to expect when you're expecting, I really sought out the food that I needed to make his brain develop well. And one of those was arugula. And so I ate a ton of arugula, and so much so that I was blowing my grocery budget. And so I decided to buy arugula seeds because I heard that you can cut it again and again after it grows. And so I built a salad table on my apartment balcony, and I sprinkled some arugula seeds and became obsessed with gardening, and how much better the food tasted and how it made me feel. And so I really wanted to offer that to other people who also are interested in eating that food, but don't really have the resources to grow their own gardens. So I started a 12-person CSA program in 2012 and have been growing the CSA program ever since, adding new customers each year. And the second year in business in 2013, I started selling to restaurants as well. I have scheduled my entire business and business plan around my kids and wanting to have weekends off. And that has not translated to weekends off. I do need to clarify that. But we don't do sales on the weekends. So most of my team actually does not work weekends right now. I have, and I do take more time off on the weekends these days. So that is a little bit about how I got started. I did compensate for not having land by bartering for the use of land, and ultimately was leasing 6 different sites by 2019 when I purchased land of my own. And I had all of those sites certified organic, which is a thing I did. And now having one site certified organic is feels like a breeze in comparison to having 6 organic system plants. But yeah, that's a little bit how I got started. I did name the farm Moon Valley Farm because when I was growing up, my dad used to orate stories, like bedtime stories, to me and my siblings. And he created this land called Moon Valley, in which its inhabitants had superpowers. And we all had chapters of the story about us. And he had named me the Animal and Plant Girl, where I could communicate with animals and plants. And I had a big greenhouse and a pig named Minerva. And I was only 3 years old at the time. And it's sort of wild because no one in my family is a farmer, and I had never really considered farming for most of my life until I really became one. So it was just an interesting thing. So at the farm now, we have a fun exercise where the staff all has an imagined superpower. And my daughter has drawn their super characters, so that's pretty fun.
That's awesome. There's going to be a book. I can see it coming.
Graphic novel.
So you have a strong focus in not just providing food for your family at this point, but in providing food for all others. And that is sort of part of your regenerative path. But let's kind of talk about, okay, you've made this decision, you're going to farm regeneratively. How easy or not easy has that been?
It's very difficult. I feel like there is a conflict of interest that I live with every day between making money off of the land, and farming vegetables is inherently extractive, and being a responsible soil steward, which requires long-term plans, which often are just in direct conflict with making money. So I live in that rubber band pull, and it's really there are some things, tactics that I have developed or that I utilize that so many other farmers utilize, like adding compost, right? That's sort of like, okay, you can add compost and organic matter to the soil before you or after, at any point before you are growing some crops, and maybe you're adding some organic matter and extracting. But what farming looks like to me right now on 25 acres, the most sensical path toward soil stewardship is cover cropping. And that does mean that I do have to take acres out of production in order to prioritize those cover crops. And so I think for me, one of the ways that I've found to grow year round and a diverse amount of crops is not growing everything all the time. I just realized that I cannot do that. I can't be everything for my customers every week of the year. And strategically working with other producers in order to fill those gaps in is how I've found that I can really focus on my goals of long-term soil stewardship and also grow cash crops responsibly.
Yeah, I think in our earlier conversation, Emma, you mentioned setting aside ego when it comes to deciding that you can't be the grower of every particular vegetable or everything you want to be all at the same time. It's a journey. So thank you.
It is, yeah, and their ego is involved. I mean, you have to, it's very humbling. Everything about being a farmer is humbling, I have to say, but it is very humbling to say, like the potatoes. I might as well just give that example while we're looking at my hands in my soil on potatoes. I decided to stop growing potatoes this past year. My soil pH here on this new property is very high. It's above 7. And I have only so many acres in production. And, I've really felt like the amount of potatoes we had been growing, which was about 1.25 acres, that would be better utilized in cover crop this year. And so we did that, and we aggregated the potatoes from growers with soil perfectly adapted to growing potatoes. And it worked out really great. And my team loved me. That was a triple win.
So Your land was conventionally farmed
Yes.
when you bought it. Let's talk a little bit about the transformation of the land itself and what your process has looked like and some of the hurdles you've had to get beyond or are still working to get beyond.
Well, since I am talking to a room with a lot of farmers, it's probably very understandable that I couldn't afford the best land. I couldn't afford all the land I wanted. I couldn't afford the best quality land, especially not with a house and a barn on it already. So I did soil tests, and I do have nutrient-rich soil, and it is a loam. It's a gravelly loam. It's extraordinarily rocky. But it does have really great components. Like I said, it does have a really high pH, and it also has very high phosphorus levels that I inherited. So I solved those problems before I purchased the land, and I started consulting with my farmer friends and peers and mentors about, like, can I buy this land? Is this workable? Is this going to produce vegetables for me? And we decided yes. And it actually does grow very beautiful soil plants here. So I'm really happy about that. But we have to manage the high phosphorus levels and the high pH as well. So we do have challenges there. That really derailed my compost applications. I really could not do that. I wasn't not allowed to do that the first year. And so it necessitated cover cropping and getting organic matter in my soil in other ways, like straw mulching and tilling that under, as well as cover cropping. So we have utilized those methods, and I am part of that PASA study, as well as we do take annual soil tests here and do consult with soil experts to really help guide our plans for the year, especially as we're getting started on this new property. So yeah.
What's happening with the phosphorus situation now?
It's going down. It's still high and it's going down. It was insanely high. It was literally off the charts. So I don't know how big they make their charts, but it felt like very intense.
Emma, was that due to the conventional farming methods?
I mean, it was conventionally farmed. The farmer who was farming this owns a dairy farm, and I believe that they're in a loophole where they're allowed to overspread the manures. So I see them spreading every single year. And I know that those phosphorus levels have got to be high as well. I am not sure. I mean, I follow nutrient management, as I'm sure all of the other farmers here do, and I'm not sure how that's allowed, but yeah, Jared.
Yeah, I also have really high phosphorus on all the land. Do you run the PMT, phosphorus management tool, on any of your fields to allow certain phosphorus usage? And can you talk about that?
Yeah. So we have been working with that tool, and we have been able to add some compost on some fields since. And so we did apply a small amount of compost to all of our fields in 2021, and are allowed to make applications, based on what the plants are going to be extracting. Yeah, so I mean, does anyone else have any questions at this moment?
We can,
Okay, great.
we can move on past this slide, I think, just because you have already touched on it, but I think it speaks to kind of your overall farm model and how you're constantly tweaking what you grow, how you grow it, what inputs you're allowed to use, what's affordable, to get to this place of having a successful, diverse, year-round operation, and kind of how all of that relates to the economic drivers that are in play.
Yeah, you can't farm at all if you don't make money. So that, has to be top of mind when making these decisions, because otherwise I would have to sell my property and someone else will make those decisions. So that is definitely a main driver. And I also just wouldn't be happy with myself if I didn't prioritize long-term soil stewardship. So they are really both top of mind.
Emma, when you began to sort of grow out the CSA and you began to realize that maybe you shouldn't be growing everything because it wasn't economical or you didn't have the land for it or whatever, how did you begin the process of reaching out to others or selecting other farms to supply product?
It actually was lack of walk-in cooler space over lack of land that made me realize that I would need to kind of supplement my winter crops from another farm. And I, at that point, was really partnering with my friend and peer, David Polk of Sassafras Creek Farm, and he was scaling up his carrot and beet growth. And those were things that I loved growing. And I, at that time, was leasing all of those 6 properties, and I had built 3 coolers, like 3 little CoolBot things, and one of them's on wheels, and they were full to the gills. I, could get really stressed right now just thinking about opening opening the walk-in cooler door, and you cannot physically walk into it because there's so many vegetables stacked to the ceiling, and we still didn't have enough to last through February and March, and not even to think of April. So we started aggregating some carrots and beets from him, and we also started to aggregate at the same time gourmet mushrooms from King Mushroom Farm. That was one of those operations that I loved the idea of starting myself. And it got to a point where I realized there's no way. It's a totally different skill set growing mushrooms. It's a totally different business. I'm just not going to be able to do that right now. So working with him was a really great decision I am grateful for every week. We still partner with him for both of those partnerships. We started around I think 2017 or 2018, and those 2 farmers are still our biggest 2 partners. One of the reasons that I sought mushrooms out was because it's very steadfast. They have steady production. They're a high value crop, and they're a pull sale. So, we work with restaurants and they really need items like that, like salad mix, carrots, mushrooms, things that price won't fluctuate and production won't fluctuate. And so that they can menu items and stick to their budget. And so with that in mind, we have focused a lot of our production on those kinds of things that we can offer in a sort of steadfast way. We're never going to be able to, I don't think, be as clockwork as the mushroom farmers can be, but we are trying. And David Polk is very good at cranking out those carrots. So we are able to have those on the regular for a pretty steady price.
Emma, we have a question in chat from Rob Schnabel. For your vegetable growing infrastructure, have you taken advantage of any agency funding opportunities, hoop houses, irrigation through NRCS, cold storage through Marbidco, et cetera?
Yes, since purchasing my farm, I have. It was something that I wasn't really able to utilize when leasing land. I wasn't really able to build coolers anywhere. I didn't have I just didn't have barns or permission. So yes, the NRCS did help us put irrigation in our fields, and the Marbidco did fund a cooler, and actually two, and one through their, well, I don't remember the names actually. I'm off the top of my head, but two different programs that they ran. One was a COVID related one that we got to scale up our growth during COVID, which we did. And one was for aggregating from other farmers. And we are able to aggregate more because of having more cold storage.
And if I missed it, forgive me. What about hoop houses? They're quite prominent in this slide. That's all.
Oh, NRCS, yeah. I've put up several, myself as well, but yes, they have funded multiple tunnels for us across a couple of years.
And you have how many at this point?
We have two and soon to be, two greenhouses and 5, soon to be 7 high tunnels.
Is anybody else like taking deep breaths on her behalf?
The crew outside putting steel together.
Emma, we are at the conclusion of sort of the official 30 minutes of the Lunch and Learn. And I always want to sort of pause here to give folks who only had 30 minutes to give a chance to hop off if they need to, ask any final questions in chat or out loud. And then Emma has graciously offered to stick around for an extra few minutes to get at some of the questions that we haven't answered yet and to make time for some additional conversation. So if anybody needs to hop off, now's the time. We're grateful for you having been here. I'm going to go ahead and just pull this slide up so that you have my email address if you need to circle back for anything. But we'll stick around for another 15 minutes or so if folks want to. And I'll call attention to a couple of additional questions that have shown up in chat. Somebody wants to know what it's like farming with young children.
Crazy. My children took to it very nicely. And I want to note that not all children will. And, so like what I say doesn't apply to other, people and circumstances. But I am fortunate to have children who were fine. I set that expectation from essentially birth, that they would be outside. And so they were always outside. They had a pack and play in the barn. I wore them a lot. I had a little garden section that had a sandbox and some shade for them. And they could read books. That was pretty much it. Like they could play outside or read books, but those were the rules. And I have 2 bookworms to this day because they spent so much time reading inside. But that was their option. And they schlepped them all around because we had 6 different sites and I was constantly going around to the different sites. And so they were in their car seats. We had tons of food. I mean, I'm sure my car was a mess. I can't even really fully remember it. It's probably a traumatic response, but I had so many snacks and sets of clothes and an insane amount of tools in my car at all times. So
Yeah, I think I know for a fact that several of us on the webinar right now can speak to similar PTSD kinds of responses when having small children in a farming environment.
I mean, it was a lot. I was absolutely constantly either parenting or farming 24/7. It was very relentless. It was very relentless. I'm grateful for public school when that came along. That was very helpful. And as my kids got older, I did pay them $1 every 15 minutes if they wanted to participate in work. And I hardly paid them any dollars, I have to say, because they, 15 minutes went up and they were out, and they would rather read a book than than do that. And now at that scale, when I was doing everything and it was walk behind tractor scale, they were a lot more involved, and it made a lot more sense for them to be involved. But now on the tractor scale, they're just not involved as much.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And I think every farm has a slightly different way of dealing with raising a family and farming. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're all fine and they're all hard, and they work out, mostly they work out. There's been some activity in chat around books, recommended books for folks that are kind of at the beginning. So I just want to call attention to that, but we won't go through them. But Amanda has done a great job of adding some resources there for those of you who are at the starting end of this journey. I also am seeing a question about your cold storage on wheels. Let's see, is it Maya? I'm not sure how to pronounce that, but is currently on leased land and I'm working on cold storage options.
Yeah, I bought an enclosed trailer and made it into a CoolBot. CoolBot has incredible resources on how to build your own cooler. I have no construction experience, although, or I had none before I started building my own coolers and other stuff that I had to build along the way. But they really walk you through how to execute a project like this. And so finding an enclosed trailer is the thing, and you can pad it out. Mine was really tough for me because it has metal, like really thin metal studs. And so like finding those through 4 inches of rigid foam was rough, but I did it, and it's on my farm right now. I'm looking at it, it's still functional. I don't really even know what to do with it, honestly. I might sell it. So the cold storage on wheels is great. We actually had a generator on the tongue. We stuck a generator on the tongue of it because not all of our landowners allowed us to plug it in, but you can either plug it in just like a regular at a regular outlet, or you can run the generator. So that was really fantastic.
If you can remember where you sourced any of those things, I'm happy to add them to chat, or we can circle back to you later if folks need to.
Yeah, I mean, CoolBot is the one. I think any trailer salespeople are probably fine, but and then for books, Elliot Coleman really helped me.
Me too.
Get started. I was, and still am, very inspired by his work. It's not, his scale ultimately isn't the scale that worked best for me, as I decided my scale to allow myself to prioritize both my staff financially and my kids with my time. But I think that he has really, really great insights. He's a great farmer, a great human being. So
I have the feeling Amanda is out there looking for links, but I'm going to go ahead and share that name and I'll let her fill in the gaps. Emma, what's kind of next on your regenerative radar? What are some things that you have your sights set on achieving or trying, innovations that you think might be a good fit for your farm operation?
we just had a solar consultation a few minutes before this call to try to put solar on my barn. So that is definitely on my radar. It's not specifically soil, but it's just as my business and as a whole. And we are looking to also get electric in for cultivating tractors and the little like UTVs that we drive around the farm everywhere. So just reducing our emissions there. And just continuing to play with both less tillage and more ways to cover crop with long season crops, like using living mulches, essentially. I have had some times of wild success with it and sometimes of wild failure. And and then sometimes that the okay times are just okay, and by okay, I mean like necessitates weed whacking or, something, which is not a great thing. So,
someone else asked Emma if you found any funding specific for women.
For anything or?
Yeah, the question, it can be, I think, broad. Yeah.
Yeah, so the USDA and the FSA give priority points for socially disadvantaged farmers, and that would include a business like mine that's 100% woman owned, but it's anywhere over 50%, and that is also includes racial minorities or veterans or beginner farmers. And so if you're less than 10 years farming, you can get priority funding through those programs. That's the only one that comes to mind.
And again, Amanda is populating chat with all kinds of links. So there is a way, if you don't know this, if you hit those three little dots sort of down in the lower right, it gives you the option to save the chat so that you can create a file for your desktop and go back and find all these links. Otherwise, if you're like me, you have 15 tabs open on your browser and you're going to go back and bookmark them and read them later. And either one is a workable solution. We have about 3 minutes left in our extended session, and I'd just love to open the floor to others who may have questions that haven't been asked yet. I know there are some farmers in the room who've dealt with similar challenges and who continue to strive to sort of meet this regenerative standard that no one has really fully defined. So it's an ideal that that we have for ourselves and for our farms. But other questions from the room?
I was going to ask, I'm a beginning farmer, and I just was wondering, any suggestions or advice in the process of really starting out? I know it's kind of a broad question. I'm in Washington, D.C., so we literally turned our home in the city into like a little farmette. So we took the front yard and made that into a garden, and our backyard and made that into a full garden, until we can find land to lease or raise enough money to actually buy something. And this whole conversation has been just inspirational and giving me faith to keep pushing and fighting. So I was wondering to pick your brain about any advice or suggestions for beginning farmers.
Yes, well, I have a ton. And I don't know if I'll be able to say it all quickly enough. So feel free to reach out to me for a longer version at some point. But one piece of advice is to start networking now, ideally by working on a farm if you can. I would highly recommend connecting with Gail Livingstone at Deep Roots Farm because she's kind of nearby. And I will come up with the name of this other farmer that's actually in DC. You might know her already. And so connecting with other farmers, because talking with farmers is absolutely the most helpful thing. When I started out, I reached out to farmers and asked them to be my mentor of all different scales. Like I had cold call, reached out to David Polk, and I was like, you seem to be doing exactly what I want to be doing. You seem to be more knowledgeable. Specifically, I was trying to get his help on mechanics and figuring out what tractor to buy because I had zero experience with that. And I saw he really cares about mechanics. He really knows his stuff on tractors. And so, you know, he seemed to be the person. And don't be afraid to reach out to people and ask that. Don't be afraid to reach out to multiple people. Like one person isn't going to be your everything. So you can reach out to one farm about marketing and one farm about mechanics. And I actually reached out to people outside of the farm world as well to help my skills across several different disciplines. I knew nothing about running QuickBooks or chart of accounts. And I reached out to a retired entrepreneur who helped me get my books going. And by that, I mean, he like did my books for several years and on a barter agreement. And so bartering, I mean, that barter system is real
Amazing.
good. And I bartered with a mechanic as well to help teach me how to take care of my equipment and like how to do all of the things that I just had no skill set in at all. And so learning how to do those things, just really reaching out to people. People are, especially farmers, are really generous folks who have always been willing to lend expertise. And the worst they can say is no. Actually, a lot of people have said no to me and then give me their phone number anyway and pick up the phone when I call them. So they just don't want to be called a mentor, but they don't mind being called. So,
Right.
so yeah,
I
reach
think,
out to other farmers, get experience in farming and in business, because it's just not the same thing. Producing a crop ultimately is easier than selling it. And that's a hard pill to swallow because growing crops is hard. Like farming is actually really hard. And so to say that selling it is harder is sort of offensive, but it's true. It is really difficult because, well, I don't know what you're going to be growing, but with produce, the shelf life is so short. You have to sell things now. And so it's not like some meat farmers have longer windows to work with because they can freeze their product, but you just really can't do that with produce. And so you need to sell it, and you need to sell it now for a fair price, which is really hard you have to have some skill sets there. So recognizing that is a hurdle and not ignoring it is a major piece of advice.
And your email, that will be found, I can find that in the chat or on the site.
I just stuck it in the chat, yeah.
Okay, yay, thank you. I appreciate you.
Also, I do get a lot of emails, so give me grace with response time.
No problem. I appreciate you. Thank you.
I think we'll go ahead and wrap up. This is it's really inspiring. And I just want to kind of bring the last few minutes together by saying that one of the things that Million Acre Challenge and our partner organizations is really working toward, one of our primary goals is allowing farmers opportunities to network, which is exactly what's been happening in this session. And there's just nothing like it. So Emma gives perfect advice to use your resources and don't be afraid to reach out to people. There are also organizational kinds of opportunities, conferences, sessions like this, field days, farmer networks that'll help you build your confidence and your skill sets. So thank you all for being here today. Emma, a huge round of applause to you. Just a fantastic session. And folks, again, we will be posting this video on YouTube at Million Acre Challenge, and it'll show up as a link in our February newsletter. And just a reminder that in February, we're going to have Maryland Department of Ag on this Lunch and Learn session, talking about a couple of cost share opportunities that are available to smaller underserved producers. And so you might want to check that out on the second Wednesday of February. Wishing everyone a happy rest of your Wednesday and great experiences as you go forward in your regenerative process. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Thank you, guys.